You are not broken. You are becoming. Have you ever walked into a room and felt instantly misplaced? Not because you were inadequate, but because you were too aware, too precise, too silent. Have you ever noticed how your questions make people uncomfortable? How your refusal to laugh at shallow jokes or play along with hollow rituals makes others edge away? It's not your attitude. It's not your tone. It's your clarity. And clarity in a world addicted to confusion feels like violence. Let me tell you something you already feel in your bones. Most people don't fear chaos. They fear consciousness. And if you're an intelligent man, grounded, observing, refusing to perform, then you've probably been called difficult, cold, distant. But what if I told you that you're not any of those things? What if I told you the very thing that makes you feel out of place is the exact thing this world is starving for? Søren Kierkegaard once wrote, "The crowd is untruth." And yet, the crowd defines almost everything today. Relationships, masculinity, success, even love. And when you refuse to be swallowed by it, when you stop performing, something terrifying happens. You are no longer understood. Because understanding requires presence, and presence is rare. We live in a world that rewards predictability, because predictable men are safe, controllable, replaceable, but not you. You are dangerous, not because you are loud, but because you see. And when you see through everything, games, roles, masks, you can no longer participate in them. That's when they start pulling back, especially the women, not because they hate you, but because they don't know what to do with someone who cannot be seduced by performance. You scare them, not because you're too much, but because you can't be used. You are no longer playing the part. You've stopped chasing shadows. You've started asking different questions, not how can I be chosen, but what am I choosing? And that one shift changes everything, because in modern culture, most people don't fall in love with you. They fall in love with what you give them: comfort, validation, familiarity, role play. But the intelligent man, he rejects the script. He peels back the comfort. He names the illusion. And that is where the pain begins. The pain of watching people flinch when you speak truth. The pain of being called too intense when all you did was pay attention. The pain of seeing clearly and being punished for it. But hear this. That pain is not a punishment. It's a rite of passage. You were not made to be agreeable. You were not born to nod and smile and shrink. You were made to reflect, to pierce, to see. And the cost of seeing is often solitude. So if you've ever sat in silence wondering, why do I feel so misplaced? This is why. It's not because something's wrong with you. It's because something is right with you and wrong with the performance around you. And if you've made it this far, maybe you're not here for advice. Maybe you're here for confirmation that your pain is real, that your vision is valid, that your silence is sacred. So let me ask you, brother, have you ever felt like you had to hide your depth just to be loved? If yes, leave a dot, just one. Let others see they're not alone. Because this is just the beginning. And in the next chapter, we'll dissect exactly why women fall for illusions and why the intelligent man becomes invisible in the presence of projection. She doesn't see you, she sees her expectations. You walk into her life present, clear, unmasked, and she smiles, not at you, but at the story she's already written about you. Before you speak, you're assigned a role. Before you move, you're placed in a script. That's projection. It's not love, it's casting. And most relationships today are casting calls, not connections. Carl Jung warned us about this. We are not what we think we are. We are what we hide from ourselves. And what's hidden in her? Fantasy, fear, father wounds, forgotten dreams. She's not dating you. She's dating the mirror you unknowingly held up for her. You see it, don't you? The moment her affection shifts when you stop playing the character. The silence after you stop being charming. The cold distance after you assert your boundaries. Suddenly she's not looking at you anymore. She's staring at the cracks in her projection and blaming you for them. You didn't betray her. You simply stopped performing. But here's the tragedy. She doesn't know the difference between real and reliable, between presence and performance, between truth and comfort. She loved the mask, not the man. The cycle of projection, attraction. She meets a man who feels like he fits the image in her head. Strong, calm, attentive. Attachment. The fantasy grows. She fills in the blanks, romanticizes your silences, assumes your depth means devotion. Expectation, now you're not a person, you're a function, a provider of validation, of emotional regulation, of constant reassurance. Disappointment. You express an opinion. You withdraw to think. You question the dynamic. Suddenly you're cold, distant, unsafe. Withdrawal. She doesn't see her own projection shattering. She sees you as failing. And what do most men do at this point? They apologize. They chase. They try to earn back affection they never truly received in the first place, but not you, because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. She didn't betray you. She betrayed the character you refused to keep playing. Here's the harsh truth. In a culture built on narratives, the intelligent man becomes a threat, not because he changes, but because he doesn't. You don't bend. You don't beg. You don't shapeshift for safety. And that non-compliance, it feels like rejection to someone addicted to control. Women don't fear your mind. They fear your stillness. Stillness holds a mirror, and mirrors don't flatter. So what's the cost of being real in a world full of roles? You are misunderstood. You are mislabeled. You are mourned, not for who you are, but for who you refuse to pretend to be. But that cost is the price of integrity. And integrity doesn't chase applause. It walks away from performance. So if you've ever been told you're too intense or too serious and too withdrawn, ask yourself, were you being difficult? Or were you just being real? Closing line. Tragedy is not that she left. Tragedy is that you stayed too long in a role that wasn't yours.
You were not betrayed. You abandoned yourself first. There's a moment you don't talk about. Not even to yourself. The moment you knew something was off. The way she looked at you shifted. The way you began measuring every word. The way your silence became fear, not wisdom. That moment was the beginning of self-betrayal. Not because she demanded it, but because you offered it, just to keep the story alive. You told yourself, it's nothing. She's just overwhelmed. I'll adjust. I'll be more patient. And so you became less sharp, less honest, less sovereign. You began apologizing for who you are, apologizing for your tone, your stillness, your intensity. Apologizing not because you were wrong, but because you were real. You betrayed yourself, brother. Not in one dramatic collapse, but in 1,000 small concessions. Every silence when you should have spoken. Every smile you faked to keep her comfortable. Every time you said, it's fine, when it wasn't. And here's the twist. She didn't respect you more for it. She respected you less. You weren't abandoned. You abandoned yourself to be accepted. Women don't lose respect when you're strong. They lose it when you become pliable. When your strength becomes service. When your clarity becomes compliance. You weren't loved. You were tolerated. Tolerated as long as you fed the illusion. But the moment you showed your edges, she recoiled. Not because you were cruel, but because you stopped being predictable, and instead of standing tall, you shrank. You tried to fix it, tried to become what she needed, but in doing so, you lost what made you magnetic to begin with, your center. The habits of self-betrayal. Over-explaining to avoid conflict, seeking permission to express truth, walking on eggshells in your own life, numbing your needs just to maintain peace, trading presence for performance. When you ask for permission to be a man, you stop being one. Here's the bitter irony. The more agreeable you become, the more invisible you are. She doesn't want a puppet. She wants polarity. She wants presence, not performance. But you thought love meant becoming small enough to fit her comfort zone. You thought being gentle meant abandoning your fire. You thought happy wife, happy life meant spiritual suicide. And society encouraged it. Every TV show, every ad, every dating guru told you, serve her, appease her, never make her uncomfortable. But what about you? Your soul, your essence. You were taught to be safe. You were never taught to be sacred. Quote, Kierkegaard warned, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are." And that's what happened, didn't it? You became a version of yourself even you didn't recognize. You woke up one day and felt like a guest in your own skin. You weren't in love. You were in role play, begging to be accepted for a version of yourself that didn't even exist. And still, she left. Not because you weren't enough, but because you were never supposed to become less just to be kept. Closing line. You don't need forgiveness. You need to stop apologizing for being awake. You don't need to be chosen. You need to choose yourself. There comes a day, not marked by heartbreak, not triggered by betrayal, but by silence. A silence so deep it echoes. You wake up and realize you've been living someone else's story, playing roles you never auditioned for, chasing dreams that weren't even yours. That's the day individuation begins, not with applause, but with a quiet, terrifying clarity. I've betrayed myself trying to be accepted. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. Carl Jung called individuation the process of becoming who you truly are. Not who you were taught to be, not who others want you to be, but who you already are beneath the noise. You don't need to be loved more. You need to be you, unapologetically. The intelligent man does not awaken through advice. He awakens through dissonance, through the ache of living a life that insults his soul. You reach a point where faking it hurts more than being alone, where pretending to be agreeable becomes spiritual erosion. And so you step back, from everyone, from everything, not in anger but in sacred solitude. Because transformation requires isolation.
The stages of individuation. Recognition. This isn't me, this life, these habits, this love. It's not mine. Separation. You begin to walk away from toxic patterns, from shallow praise, from conditional affection. Solitude. You sit in the discomfort. You don't numb it. You don't outsource your identity. Reclamation. You return to yourself, not as a reaction, but as a revelation.
A man reborn, not louder, not prouder, but truer. You're not strong because she stayed. You're strong when you remain yourself, even after she leaves. You stop chasing women who need you to lie. You stop negotiating your soul for affection. You stop explaining your silence to those who only value noise. You become whole. And wholeness changes everything. You don't speak to impress. You speak to express. You don't seek to be liked. You seek to be aligned. You become less available, but more powerful. Less reactive, but more dangerous. Not because you threaten others, but because you no longer need them. And when a man no longer needs validation, performance, or constant attention, he becomes untouchable. Quote, Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But few accept the invitation. Because the path of individuation is steep. It costs popularity. It costs relationships. It costs the illusion of safety. But in return, it gives you yourself. Fully. Finally. Fiercely. Closing line. This isn't loneliness. This is freedom. Unpracticed.
She isn't toxic, she's possessed. Let's be clear. She's not evil. She's not manipulative. She's not cold. She's unintegrated. Possessed not by demons, but by ideals, by expectations, by the animus. Carl Jung described the animus as the unconscious masculine image in a woman's psyche. When unexamined, it becomes a tyrant. She no longer relates to you as a man. She relates to the idea of manhood she's been fed. She's not loving you. She's auditioning you. Can you fit the image? Can you serve the story? Can you perform? If you do, you're praised. If you don't, you're punished. Not always loudly, but subtly, with withdrawal, with silence, with comparison. She doesn't need you. She needs you to play your part. And you feel it, don't you? That subtle pressure, to be softer, then tougher, to be present, but not overwhelming, to lead, but only her way, to validate, but never disagree. It's not conscious. She believes she's loving you, but what she's loving is control, because when a woman's animus is unrefined, It doesn't seek partnership. It seeks dominance, not with fists, with expectations, with emotional leverage. She weaponizes withdrawal. She teaches you to flinch, to hesitate before you speak, to shape yourself to keep the peace. But peace built on performance isn't peace, it's spiritual blackmail. The signs of animus possession. She praises emotional availability, but punishes stillness. She says she wants truth, but retreats when it's inconvenient. She asks for strength, but punishes independence. She confuses discernment with emotional neglect. She turns boundaries into betrayal. And you start doubting your instincts. You start editing your soul. You start chasing clarity in someone addicted to confusion. She didn't ghost you. She dismissed the part of you she couldn't control. This isn't about hate. It's about unconsciousness. And unconsciousness is contagious if you're not rooted. If your masculinity is based on reaction, not principle, you will bend. And the moment you bend, you confirm her fear, that no man can be still under pressure. But you're not here to confirm her fears. You're here to challenge them, not with aggression, with presence. You don't raise your voice, you raise your standard. And when she tests it, you don't collapse. Quote, Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." She doesn't know she's sabotaging love. She thinks she's protecting herself, but what she's actually doing is projecting her chaos onto you, and your job isn't to fight it, it's to not become it. So here's the truth. She may leave, not because you were wrong, but because you refuse to be rewired. She may call you cold, distant, difficult, but you'll walk away knowing this. You didn't fold. You didn't flinch. You didn't fake it. You stayed rooted. And sometimes that's the greatest act of love you can give, to not participate in someone else's unconscious war. Closing line. You weren't rejected. You were released from a contract your soul never signed.
A real man doesn't need to be understood. He needs to be real. You've tried being nice. You've tried being agreeable. You've tried being emotionally available. And it didn't work. Not because it wasn't valuable, but because it wasn't you. It was a version of you shaped by reaction, by fear, by the desperate hope that if you showed up correctly, they'd stay. But what if I told you? You were never meant to be correct. You were meant to be complete. Because the sovereign man does not live in reaction. He lives in rootedness, in values, not validation, in alignment, not applause. You don't raise your voice to be heard. You raise your standard and let silence speak. The sovereign man is not controlled by attraction. He is not seduced by praise. He does not perform to be chosen. He chooses, with clarity, with calm, with terrifying precision. Because he knows something most men never learn, that freedom begins where the need to be liked ends. He can walk into a room and not seek approval. He can be challenged and not become defensive. He can love without losing himself. He can lead without dominating. He can stand alone without crumbling. Traits of the sovereign man. He doesn't chase. He invites. He doesn't convince. He lives. He doesn't react. He witnesses. He doesn't need. He aligns. He doesn't ask to be trusted. He is trustworthy by embodiment. You know him when you see him. The room shifts, not because he's loud, but because he's real. Women don't leave men like him because they're not enough. They leave because they can't manipulate them. They can't control them. They can't define them. He is not a puzzle piece. He is the table the puzzle is built on. Women don't walk away from strong men. They walk away from the man they can't control. And here's the quiet revolution. This man doesn't hate women. He doesn't fear love. He doesn't reject connection. He simply refuses to negotiate his soul to keep it. He doesn't explain his boundaries 10 times. He sets them once, with his energy. He doesn't panic in silence. He dwells in it. He doesn't confuse chemistry with chaos. He chooses peace, even if it means walking away. Quote, Kierkegaard said, "Once you label me, you negate me." And the sovereign man? He's beyond labels, not because he's special, but because he's undistracted. He's not chasing status. He's not begging for comfort. He's not addicted to the high of being chosen, because he has already chosen himself. This kind of man terrifies people, not because he's cruel, but because he's clear. And clarity, like silence, is unbearable for those who are hiding. Closing line. When you no longer need to be loved, you begin to be respected. You are not broken, you are becoming. You've walked through projection. You've faced your own betrayal. You've stood in the fires of individuation. You've watched her animus clash with your stillness. And you've stepped into sovereignty, not as performance, but as presence. So now I ask you, have you stepped off the stage? Because that's what this journey was always about. Not becoming more liked. Not becoming more successful, but becoming more real. Becoming the man who no longer performs, no longer bends, no longer begs, no longer asks for the world's permission to exist. You're not looking for a spotlight. You're reclaiming your soul. This world doesn't need another charming man. It needs a man whose silence carries truth, a man whose boundaries don't require explanation, a man whose presence heals, not because he fixes, but because he refuses to fake. Because here's the secret. When you stop trying to be palatable, you start becoming powerful. Not power that dominates, but power that withstands. The kind of power that doesn't blink in the face of rejection. The kind that smiles in solitude. The kind that no longer plays chess with chaos just to feel alive. This is the cost of awakening. You will be misunderstood. You will be misread. You will lose people who only loved your performance. But you will gain something far greater. Selfhood, sanity, sovereignty. You won't need someone to fill your silence. You'll protect it like sacred ground. You won't chase anyone to complete you. You'll meet those who can walk with you, but never own you. Quote, Kierkegaard wrote, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." And that dizziness, that weight in your chest, that ache in your gut, that's not weakness, that's rebirth. Because freedom doesn't come with instructions. It comes with silence, with detachment, with walking away from everything that asked you to dilute your essence just to be loved. And now, you are here, not perfect, not finished, but free. Final call to action. If you saw yourself in this message, share it with a brother who is still in the fog. Let this be your torch, because the world is burning, and we don't need more flames. We need firewalkers. We need mirrors that don't flatter, but free. Like, comment, subscribe. This is AEL, Stoicism. And if you're becoming a sovereign man, walk with us.